Next is, we will have Sarah Severn from Nike.
So I just want to start by saying at Nike, the overarching philosophy around sustainability is framed up around what we call innovate for a better world. So we don't talk about corporate responsibility, we don't use the word sustainability much anymore. We're just using the phrase better world because we find that's what most people can define what a better world looks like. And for consumers, that's particularly important. And there's two key aspects to the work that we do. One is around our product and developing a closed-loop business model, and that's what I'm going to talk about this morning. And the other is framed around access to sport. We are a sport company. There's a worrying decline in the number of participants in sport in the developed world, and in the developing world, there's often very poor access to sport and activity, and so there's a whole focus of our work on that, which I'm not going to touch on today, but if anyone has questions around that, while we're sat down, then do please ask. So we start by kind of framing this question about what will the world in 2030 look like. We'll have 8.5 billion people on the planet. We will probably have hit peak oil if we haven't done already, and there are many who feel we have. And with that, that means oil prices are going to continue to rise. And we're going to have extreme water scarcity, 47% living with severe water stress, and we're already seeing that in a number of places. And that, in turn, is going to be exacerbated by climate change. So the company itself has asked the question, you know, how will we thrive in the future as a business? And instead of talking about this in just theory, we're beginning to see some of the implications already happening and trickling, I think, through our supply chain. And so our view is that we need to really decouple, now I have to listen to myself twice because there's an echo with this. Sorry? Yeah. So we have to decouple our growth from scarce resources. And that's not just Nike, that's obviously our suppliers, the whole ecosystem that we work with. And we need to innovate across the entire value chain. If you look at actually where our biggest footprint is as a company, some 60% of it is at the front end in raw materials and the materials that actually go into our product, rather than things like the manufacturing and the making of product, selling and so forth. A lot of people think, for instance, that their carbon footprint is very bound up in transportation, and for us it's actually in the materials themselves. So there's some big challenges and big problems that need to be solved. What we've done with our product, and I've got some examples here, a couple of examples which I'm just going to put up on the podium here. We've taken an approach, there's two ways we can address this through product. One is you can reduce the impact of the product as it exists today, and you can work on the materials through 4 efforts, really. Reducing waste, reducing toxics, looking at your energy inputs and reducing those, and reducing the water that goes into any of the processes, particularly for apparel. The other side is what we call the closed loop, and the idea here is that you're really going to look at a way that when this product is created, it's created with the intention of bringing it back and using and reusing all those materials again in some capacity. And we look at a couple of approaches. One, of course, you could build products to be biodegradable, and consumers, when they're finished with them, could find some way to compost them. But typically, we think the materials have value, and it's much better for us to get those products back. So a lot of the challenges that we're setting ourselves now are around how we do this closed-loop approach. A first stage in doing this was the development of what we call the considered index, and Denise actually earlier showed the Timberland index. This is a similar approach. Nike's been working on this actually for a very long time. And we have 4 components to our index, one based around the use of environmentally preferable materials, and there's a whole protocol that goes behind that. Reducing waste, reducing the use of solvents in the production process, which is very typical in footwear manufacturing. And then we have an element that we call considered innovation. So if a designer comes up with a very different and innovative process, they get points for that. And it's essentially a scoring system, and it was designed to help product designers make choices about how to reduce the impact of these products without having to be specialists, without having to have any real knowledge. They could go into a system, and it's basically a tool for people to use, a calculator, which allows them to go in and select materials, and they get points. And when they get to a certain level, it's considered to be a bronze, a silver, or a gold. And so that sets up competition between the designers, and they're really interested in trying to beat each other, if you like, to get higher scores. So we found that to be very motivating. The other thing, kind of an example of the use of that, is World Cup 2010. The shirts for all the soccer teams were 100% recycled polyester that actually came from plastic bottles like the ones we're using right now. And this is an example of a 100% polyester shirt. It's interesting to me because this technology has been around for quite a long time. It's not that innovative. And yet, when we launched this, we got enormous press coverage. It was as if the journalists had just discovered recycled polyester for the first time. And I think for us, that's, you know, when you live in the world where you know these things are going on and you're kind of close to the technology, you think, well, everybody must know about this. But clearly, that's not the case. And for us, it's about the power of sport and connecting athletes to this story that allows us to tell the bigger story for consumers. So our North Star, we talk about having a North Star ambition, which is to move towards this entirely closed-loop system. And I think the starting point for that was a program we have called Reuse a Shoe, which some of you may have come across. It's in Nike Towns and Nike Retail. You can actually take your shoes back once you finish with them, put them in the recycling bins. We take them back and the material is recycled and put into sports surfaces. And these are installed in, we do everything from basketball courts to soccer fields. And we license the materials to the makers of these surfaces. But, you know, taking back 20, 30 million shoes when we make millions a year is just not sufficient. So really the vision is for something that's much more about a shifted business model. And in order to do that, we're probably going to have to change the structure of the supply chain as well. And I have, hopefully, a video which will describe this better than I can.
This is not a shoe. It's an ethos. A shoe that is reborn as a tennis court, or a basketball, or another shoe, a better shoe. A faster, lighter, stronger shoe can't still be called a shoe, can it? When a shoe runs its course, when it has surpassed its shelf life, when it has passed its prime and seen better days, when it has pushed us to greater goals, is that it? Is that the end? Why does it have to have a shelf life? Or for that matter, why does anything else? What if we remove the shelf? What if the cycle was a closed loop, where anything could become anything? A shoe into a shoe, or a shoe into a shirt? A shoe can't change the world, but an ethos can.
So that's the challenge. And obviously, as I've said, we need a whole ecosystem of people to work with us on this. And I was really struck by what Jules was saying in the previous panel about the democratization of innovation, because that's exactly what we're trying to encourage. We helped to co-found something called the Green Exchange last year, which is hopefully the website will be properly up and running in October. On that website, we have put over 400 patents from Nike, and there are some patents from other companies. And what we're doing is creating a space for patent exchange so that people can come in and license the technology, sometimes completely free of charge. Sometimes there'll be a charge. Sometimes there'll be certain groups that are excluded from using those patents. For instance, if you have a direct competitor that you don't want to share the technology with. But the idea was to try and grow and flourish the innovation and allow these patents to be used much, much more widely to encourage the development of sustainable products and processes. And ultimately, in its full form, we're hoping it's also going to be a place where you can share knowledge. So for instance, the considered index that I talked about is not really very useful if it's just a Nike tool. It's far more useful if it's shared with our competitors and that we can all work together to improve it so it becomes more of, it levels the playing field. And we're working on that as well. So we do a lot of collaboration with our competitors around those ideas. So that's it from me.